kind of meet people where they are and help them, make healthy changes, as you know, in your work as well. Like if you give somebody a list of 50 things they need to do to be healthy, they're not going to do any. So I really work with people to try to hone in on, the first couple of big ticket changes to get some traction and then move things along with more like what I think of as like polishing and cleanup. So yeah, and it's a great way to make a living. I really enjoy it. So,
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so really the first chapter talks about, the fundamental reasons why we sleep and touches on the neglect in modern society with how they approach sleep. People don't really, they always think exercise is so much more important. And, I mean, obviously, in a lot of the chapters, they talk about the educational system and how our kids go to school so early when it's really so important for them to get the sleep. And, he gives the science behind that. So, my question to you is why do you think people often deprioritize sleep despite clear scientific evidence of its importance? Why do you think that?
I think that it's hard to prioritize something that you do unconscious, like where you're just, there's so many rewards in our awake life, whether they're actual sort of like frontal lobe rewards of like doing fun things and feeling rewarded that way, or working and accomplishing something, or even eating dinner or watching a movie or things that are entertaining. It's a different sort of reward system.
Right.
And so it's hard when you lead a busy life to then say, okay, I'm done. It's time for me to do this thing that I won't really remember and isn't feels like it's not accomplishing anything. But, we now understand that the reward for sleeping is really tremendous. And I think there are people who really do prioritize sleep and feel rewarded by it in ways that some other people don't. Like there's sort of individual differences there. And but yeah, I mean, I think that really it comes down to society and what we our motivation, the way we get into habits of reward and motivation.
Right. Um, the second chapter discusses caffeine, jet lag, and melatonin and how it affects our circadian rhythm and the ability to fall asleep. So I'm really interested in what you have to say about this. I mean, the first thing is, do you recommend melatonin supplements?
I do not. In fact, I recommend against them in most cases. Melatonin has really kind of blown up as this thing that people think is like, oh, it's natural. It's like taking vitamin D or something, and it is not. Melatonin is a hormone that your body produces naturally. Um, you know, Most people have plenty of it. As we get older, it does diminish some, and that would be a discussion to have with your doctor, who is very informed about it. Because some doctors will just say, sure, they're kind of on the same bandwagon. Um, but for the average person, we do not need to supplement with melatonin. And in fact, it doesn't work when you take it every day. It loses its sedating impact pretty quickly within a few days. What it does do is act on your entire circadian rhythm. And although I don't do research, I certainly have a lot of anecdotal evidence of crazy dreams, night sweats, night waking, even early waking, the temperature fluctuations and stuff like that. So it's also not regulated and it's just not safe. So I will recommend it for jet lag. I think it's very helpful if you can find a high quality producer. Taking a low dose, like 1 to 3 milligrams, can help you adjust your circadian rhythm to local time when you travel.
Mhm.
That is a really good use of melatonin because the whole problem with jet lag is that your melatonin isn't helping you at the right time.
Right.
So that helps. It does work in low doses for people who have ADHD. If you take it early in the evening, like 8 p.m. ish,
Mhm.
it can help to sort of decelerate all of that brain activity and stimulate the natural production of melatonin at the right time. But when people take like 5 or 10 milligrams at bedtime, that's hitting them by the time it's digested and metabolized. It's hitting the system at a point in the night when your melatonin should actually be depleting. And so you end up with a hangover and potentially all these other disruptions. So careful with it, you know.
Yeah, I've had that experience. There are melatonin inducing foods that you can
Hmm.
eat, like tart cherries.
Yes.
And so that's one of the things that I work on in my practices. I talk to my clients about that. And it is a hormone. So if you're into natural sleep, that's not the way to go. I can't as a health coach prescribe any sort of supplements. I would ask them to go to their doctor anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
So but and they do, your melatonin does starts calcifying as you age, so it can be an issue. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. What about caffeine?
You know, people tell me all the time it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect me, but it's pretty clear that it does affect everyone in terms of what's happening while you're sleeping. You might be able to fall asleep with caffeine in your system, but it does interfere with the quality. You're not getting deep sleep. You're not getting good REM sleep, and you're more likely to wake up more fully between sleep cycles. So people often don't put those dots together, and but you know, if caffeine can be good for cognitive function. It's not a bad thing, but you want to really make sure that it is, if you're having a cup of coffee the first thing, fine. If you're struggling with sleep, you might want to experiment with getting rid of that and seeing if you sleep better. It's possible that you will, particularly as we get older and metabolism slows down. You don't really know how long that caffeine's in your system. It's kind of a minimum of 12 hours till it's fully metabolized in like a young adult. So what's it doing for an 80-year-old? It's going to be much much more intrusive.
Well, and the other thing is too, is like, for instance, decaf. A lot of people think they can have it after dinner, and it's 30% caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that is something that people really need to know. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, well, I agree with you, and I think Dr. Walker suggests drinking caffeine before 2 o'clock. And I
Yeah.
even suggest to my clients, if they are having sleep issues, before 12 and just in the morning.
Yeah, and the other piece is that that also doesn't mean go ahead and pound four before 12, because what happens is, the more caffeine you have, the worse you feel when it wears off. And so, like, because you have all this accumulation of sleep pressure that's been masked by the caffeine, which is keeping you alert. Caffeine wears off and you just get punched with the fatigue, and then it feels very hard to get through the rest of the day without more.
Yeah.
So it's,
A vicious
you want to be,
cycle.
yeah, it
Yeah,
is a vicious cycle.
really. Um, Chapter 3 talks a lot about, I'm going to ask you guys some questions too who've joined us, but it's going to be more about your own sleep, or questions you have for Janet and myself. Um, Chapter 3 talks about how sleep is structured and generated, referencing key research on circadian rhythms and brain waves. So, my question to you is, can someone accurately assess the quality of their sleep without a sleep study? So, I mean, I, for one, would say, I think wearables are really great for that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that they give you some information. It's really important to put that into the appropriate context, because what I don't like about wearables is that they kind of give you a grade, and then that can actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy where you feel worse during the day because you were told that you didn't sleep well, when you might not be a person who really pays attention to that. And when you start to shine a light on sleep that way,
Mhm.
it can create more performance anxiety. So you just want to be careful about how you're interpreting it. But yeah, they can give you kind of a rough idea of what your sleep quality is looking like. Sleep studies obviously are the gold standard, but even with sleep studies, there's a variety. Like if you go into a sleep lab, that's going to be much more extensive than what you would do at a home study. And so it's sort of a question of what kind of information are you looking to get?
For the average person, if they're tracking on, say they wear an Apple Watch and they get their data on their phone every morning, um, how many times should you go into REM and deep sleep? Is the
So,
average four for each?
yeah, I mean, 4 or 5, you go into every stage of sleep in every sleep cycle, and every sleep cycle is about 90 minutes. But you spend different amounts of time in, let's say, deep sleep versus REM sleep at different times of night. At the beginning of the night, you're getting mostly deep sleep in your sleep cycles. By the end of the night, you've completed most of your deep sleep and you're only getting REM. So, you know, the number, most people have 4 to 5 sleep cycles per night. And so you should have 4 to 5 cycles of each of those, but how long they are and how they're distributed is going to look different than you might expect.
I'm going to just show everybody. This is if they can see it. I don't know if you can see it. Well,
Mm.
actually, you can see it there because I have blurred. But that's my sleep. And if you look at the top, I think the top is the REM, the light blue. The middle is the core, and the dark at the bottom is the deep.
Right.
And that's 7 hours and 15 minutes. So
And so that, yeah, sorry.
I didn't get deep sleep at the very end. It was mostly REM.
Yeah,
That's interesting you said that. Yeah.
that's normal and it's very frightening to most people. Like if you didn't know how to interpret that, you would think there was a big problem. And
Yeah.
so that's where I get a lot of clientele, from people who get really upset not understanding how to read the data even and thinking the other piece that's tricky with the wearables is that they 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 create this idea that you can manipulate those numbers with your daily activities, and yes you can to a certain extent, like all the things he's talking about, caffeine, alcohol, even stress.
Exercise. Yeah.
But at the same time, if are you going to see a direct link? Not necessarily. Like it's not that, okay, I had a turkey dinner, so I'm high in tryptophan and I'm gonna get 7 more minutes of deep sleep. But I see people and I get press calls all the time asking me, like, what can people eat to, maximize this? And what should you do for that? And which tonic, they were like skinny girl sleep cocktails or something going around for a while. And I was just like, these things are the effect of that is overblown, and when I see people who are trying to manipulate those numbers with such specificity, usually they create more problems for themselves. They create insomnia because they're putting so much pressure on themselves to sleep a certain way.
Right.
Can I can I jump in and ask a question, Emily?
Sure.
Um, can you just give us a breakdown on, for example, if Emily said she didn't get a lot of deep sleep at the end of her night and mostly REM, is there where does the mo like the true is it as assumed that the true relaxation only really happens in the deep sleep? Or can
Well,
the REM sleep also give your body a chance to heal and rest?
the deep sleep really is for your tissues and for toxins, and it regulates your cortisol and blood sugar levels and things like that. So, and Janet can tell you more. And then REM is really for memory consolidation and for like creativity and things like that. So, um, you want to step in on this because
They're both important. Like
yeah,
it's
they're
not
both
that
really
one
important.
is better than the other,
Yeah.
and you need them all. And but you only spend like 5 or 10% of your night in deep sleep, and that's what is upsets people because they get these readings back. And if you saw on Emily's reading, most of it was stage 2, which is light sleep. And that's like 45 to 55% of your night.
So
And
my REM on that chart that I just showed you all was 2 hours and 20 minutes, and my deep was an hour and 10. And then core is kind of in between. That's 3 hours and 45 minutes, and then 21 minutes awake. So it was really probably 7 hours of sleep. So,
and
that's,
that's an appropriate distribution.
yeah,
Like that, that's not that. And so that's where people get, you want to maximize deep sleep, but understanding what that really means, it's like if you're really just going for like an hour and a half of deep sleep, that's maximizing it.
right.
Uh,
Exactly. Okay. So, I just want to mention one chapter. I'm not going to even talk about it, but it's really, they were talking about mammals and how they sleep different times and all that stuff. So, chapter 5, and we talked about sleep patterns shift dramatically throughout life from infancy to old age. So it's really, how should people adjust their sleep expectations as they age? I mean, what do we do? Because we're all getting older and we're sleeping less, and
right.
we want more.
Yeah. Well, the what's important is to recognize that as you get older, some of these things that can erode sleep quality are more powerful because your sleep is somewhat more fragile. um, you are more susceptible to caffeine or you're more susceptible to alcohol. Your body's not processing it the same way that it used to. Um, but the other piece that's and also as hormones change and the lifespan, sleep is affected, and the way that sleep stitches together is affected. Is when progesterone is low or depleted, you're going to wake up more fully during the night than you used to, and you might be awake for longer than you're used to. So it's important to understand what's normal so you don't get upset. Because once you start getting upset, you make things worse. If you're lying there upset, that you're awake in the middle of the night for 20 minutes, that is going to bring in adrenaline, is going to bring in your sympathetic nervous system, and that is designed to keep you awake to solve problems. Even if the problem is insomnia, having your body only knows how to give you adrenaline to solve big problems. So you really, in understanding what's normal, you can take away the distress reaction that tends to balloon the problem, like, or to create a problem. And, that also includes your daytime coping strategies. So recognizing that, just because I don't wake up feeling the way I did when I was 20 doesn't mean that I need 7 cups of coffee to get through my day to try to feel a different way. And when you're more sort of accepting of the what is healthy and normal, then you're less likely to do things to that might make it harder for you to fall asleep at night or harder for you to stay asleep at night.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Um, so what do you recommend we do? So we wake up in the middle of the night or at some point, and how should we spend that time? Do we put on the light and read, or I don't do the reading I guess I could read on my iPad. What do you
No,
recommend?
you should never read on your iPad.
Okay. So
Like,
really?
you could read on a Kindle, because they aren't backlit. They don't have blue light
Right.
in them.
Mhm.
And Kindles are actually really, I'm not paid by Amazon, but Kindles are actually really good for this because you don't need to turn on the light, and yet they don't disturb your natural melatonin.
Mhm.
But turning on the light and reading, I would recommend getting an amber, a warm color bulb, or a book light that is a warm color, because you don't want to turn on a bright daytime LED light that will disrupt your ability to return to sleep. But yes, if you are awake during the night, stay off your phone, don't go eat. Maybe you have to go to the bathroom, maybe not. Sometimes we just go to the bathroom because we're awake. But I have countless women in my practice who successfully finish treatment, picking up a book when they wake up and reading half a page. And then it becomes this association where the body is recognizing, okay, I'm safe, it's okay, I'm not going into problem solving mode, there's no fires to put out, time to go back to sleep. And it reminds the body that because the mind is occupied with something pleasant, it reminds the body that it's okay to sleep. And so that's my number one, frankly, is reading, because reading is particularly good because you have to do a little bit of work. So you can't be like ruminating about something else while you're reading if it's engaging enough. Like, I wouldn't read this book at night. This book would freak me out at night. Like, and I would make sure to read. I don't read personal or professional development at all. It should, something with a story to carry you away, that really helps to communicate that there's no reason to be awake. And then the body takes that cue and takes you back to sleep.
What about listening?
Listening is okay. It's not as all encompassing as reading. Because with reading you've got to like decode text, and there's something about that focus that's a little bit easier. But I do have a lot of people who listen. The key with that is to make sure you're not like getting in your phone at night, which is hard to when Kindles now do have an audiobook feature if you get the fancier ones. Some of them even have a feature where you can go back and forth between audio and text in the same book, which I think is spectacular. Um, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do, I don't recommend sleep stories, things that are like super boring to try to like, bore you to sleep. I don't recommend meditation in the middle of the night because that can backfire. And if it's not working after 10 minutes, you start to get upset. And then you're in a paradoxical reaction where you're starting to get like agitated and your breathing is more rapid. Um, the other thing that can happen with meditation is I've had some people who get sort of stuck in a meditative state and they don't transition into real sleep.
Mhm.
Like they just kind of hover in that like stage one in and out sleep for a long time. So I like content, and I differ from my colleagues on this. I like real, like narrative content because I feel like it it's like throwing your mind a bone. It tricks you out of your normal multitasking, problem solving mental load that is sort of the go-to for most women I know. So,
Thank
That's
you.
interesting. I've done a little study on myself recently because I think we're all addicted to electronics.
mhm.
And, for years I had my phone charging right next to me, which is probably one of the worst things you can do. And then we're all addicted to Netflix, and I have blue light glasses, which works. But I stopped doing that and started reading, and I'm sleeping an hour more a night.
Yeah.
So it really does work, and it's worth it to charge your phone in another room. Just get rid of it
Yeah.
because you're that nobody's going anywhere. You'll have it in the morning. So
Mhm.
anyway.
Yeah, and it really it does reading just kind of washes out your brain and then it becomes like a nice thing you do for yourself. It feels better than stupid reruns or whatever. Like it really does start to feel like a gift you're giving yourself at the end of the day. That's something you get to do. That's really nice.
There's so many good books out right now. It's really
Hmm.
amazing. It's great. Um, Details, chapter 7 and 8 really talks about the details of severe cognitive and physical effects of sleep deprivation, links to sleep deprivation and chronic illnesses such as heart disease, obesity, and cancer. And certainly in my work, I know that metabolic health issues can be related to not enough sleep.
Hmm.
So, my question to you is how can people recognize when chronic sleep loss is impairing their daily function? And how do you talk to patients about serious long term health impacts of sleep deprivation?
I talk to them very carefully about it because it's very scary. And the more pressure you put on yourself to sleep for any reason, whether it's productivity tomorrow or, being the perfect parent, being the perfect employee, being the perfect, wedding guest, whatever, or preventing all of these terrible health consequences, it it actually makes it harder to sleep. And so, you know, it's a tricky conversation in terms of helping people to realize that there are things that they can change that will improve their sleep and therefore improve their health. Um, I don't think it's so much of a surprise to people anymore that there are these health outcomes because it's everywhere in every, news outlet. It's like a very popular clickbait to tell you that you're going to die early because you're not sleeping enough. Um, so I'm not delivering that news so much as helping people manage their fear about it and improve their sleep, so they can improve their health. But that every time one of those articles comes out, my phone rings because it scares people. And then sometimes they try to fix what's not broken. Because what you don't realize so much too is like, there's a mean there. Like, so maybe it's 7.5 hours that this study says you need to get to not get diabetes. But there's a standard deviation there too. And so if you are one standard deviation from the mean, it doesn't mean that if you get more sleep, you will be in better shape. In fact, trying to get more sleep than you personally need actually can lead to rebound insomnia, because
Yeah, that's
oversleeping.
what he talks about in the book.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting. Um, okay, so moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about dreaming and overnight therapy and dream creativity and control. So REM sleep and dreaming mirrors psychotic experiences, but in a helpful therapeutic way. Dreaming helps us process trauma and emotional events, and dreams facilitate creativity and problem solving. So, what's your interpretation of dreams in the context of therapy?
I mean, I don't do a lot with dreams in therapy, frankly, unless they're nightmares. And even if they're nightmares, there's not really a lot to do with them unless they are recurrent nightmares. And then there's a specific therapy for that, called nightmare imagery rehearsal therapy.
Mhm.
Um, I think dreams are interesting, but I also, come from a very analytic style training in my graduate school, and am very skeptical of sort of reaching beyond the data, right? Like the Freudian mentality about all of that, I find, problematic. There's a lot about Freud that's a little tricky. Um, and so I look at dreams in terms of like, are they offering anything? Are they offering anything interesting to what we're thinking about? And there's sort of a jumping off point for conversation. But I'm not looking at it for archetypes or,
What does it mean or
yeah,
anything?
like, well, it
Yeah,
was a cigar, like it was a
yeah,
cigar,
yeah.
like that.
Part four talks about sleeping pills to society transformed, and it discusses chapter 12 discusses sleep disorders and tragic consequences of disorders like insomnia. I don't think we really need to talk about that much. Let's go back. Let's go on to chapter 3. Let's identify the summary there was chapter 3 is iPads, factory whistles, and nightcaps. So it identifies modern barriers to sleep, including screens, work schedules, and alcohol. So this opens the question about what you guys are doing that you think might be interrupting your sleep. Janet and I can tell you alcohol is one of the number one things that's going to interrupt your sleep. So it's interesting, modern society suggests that you have a drink at night, because if you're going to drink, it's probably better to drink at lunch. You know, honestly, it's like, I'm not a big drinker anymore, but it's one of the worst things you can do for your sleep. So, any other things we talked about work screens and, work schedules are so early these days, but now some of these companies, as Matthew mentions in this book, like Google, and they said Goldman Sachs I was like shocked, but, they're staggering their workforce and letting them come in at 9 or 10 during the day, so in the morning, so they can sleep longer. But any thoughts on any of those things?
I mean, I think that yes, giving people flexibility that, would favor night owls, because night owls have just been mistreated for all, throughout all time, and people think they think they're lazy, they think they're, sort of not adaptive to society, and it's just a different schedule, and they're chronically sleep deprived. And so if you have this whole, then there's like data that comes out and says, oh, people who are early birds are healthier. Well, they're healthier because they get more sleep because the society lets them. And so I do think anything that helps people to sleep more according to their chronotype is good. There are limits to what companies can do. Like the stock market's not going to change its hours. And, you know, I even tried really, really hard to speak out about school start times as the pandemic showed, when I had two teenagers during the lockdown, and they were like different people when they started sleeping. They didn't have to go to school and I live in New York City, so they're getting up and commuting 45 minutes an hour to get to class. And when school starts at 8, I mean, there's just no way to succeed there. And nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody. The New York Times didn't want to hear it. Chalkbeat didn't want to hear it. My representatives didn't want to hear it. The principals didn't want to hear it. I was successful with my son's school. When they went back to in person, they moved it half an hour, but there's no across the board understanding of this being a real issue. And it's, our kids in New York City aren't driving, but they're on the subway falling
Yeah,
asleep,
yeah.
and
Well, I mean, I had
not learning.
a different experience because my grown son, who was working in investment banking at a bank, was home working from home and working from, say, 7 in the morning until 4 at night, maybe getting 3 to 4 hours sleep.
Oh,
It is to see it. They tell you they're doing it. It's a lot different when you see it
yeah.
and you see how they react and how moody they are and how awful. So it really is a big issue in the workplace and in schools. Okay, let's move on to chapter 4. It talks about the summary was really critiques overuse of sleeping pills and offers CBT1 as an effective alternative. So,
CBTI,
yeah.
for insomnia.
Okay, so I'm curious about how you introduce CBT to a new client struggling with sleep. And because I know you do cognitive.
I do, yeah. You know, they come to me looking for it. So I'm not having to do a ton of sales. They've been referred by their sleep medicine doctor, their primary care doctor who doesn't want to prescribe sleep meds anymore. The sleep medicine doctor who's like, no, you don't have apnea, you have insomnia, or any number. The dentists will anybody will refer to me, OBGYNs a lot. So, I really my job is to help people understand how behavioral change and cognitive work can in fact replace sleeping pills, and that sleeping pills really undermine your confidence and your ability to sleep naturally. And they also are not benign. They do alter your sleep architecture. Meaning some of them you're not getting REM sleep. So what's that doing to your memory? They're Dr. Walker is telling us all about, early death that comes from taking these medications. I find that, his tactics are a little too scary for me
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but and I do think there's a place for sleep aids, in a person's medicine cabinet, but not daily or even weekly. It's really for something that if you're going through something and you're, it's acute and temporary and sleeping pills can help you get through it, that's okay, but you're going to have to get off of them.
Can, can you
And
talk about can you talk about magnesium? Because I was recommended magnesium
sure.
at night.
Magnesium is not a sleep aid. Magnesium is a mineral supplement, and it is helpful because many people are deficient in it, particularly women. And it helps to kind of relax the muscles in the body. So, and it can certain kinds of magnesium help with cognitive function as well. So that helps with sleep. It helps you to more stay asleep, and it improves sleep quality. So it's not going to put you to sleep. And if you're looking to it to do that, you're probably going to be awake, and upset. So like I consider it to be a sleep enhancer. Other things like that can be helpful, again, always talk to your doctor, but um, L-theanine. A lot of people are taking GABA. I don't see a big help with GABA, but maybe. Um, Interestingly, there's a new focus on a gene mutation that a lot of people have that affects metabolism of folate, and taking methylated folate can be really helpful for sleep and anxiety if you have that gene mutation, I mean. Um, I really like CBD myself. THC, like the psychoactive part of marijuana, is not good for sleep. And in fact, a lot of women are like chowing down on gummies these days for sleep. Um, and I THC will help you fall asleep because it takes you out of your headspace and into something else, but it in fact is very activating in the brain. And so the sleep quality is compromised. But CBD has been found, there's data actually showing that CBD binds to receptors that enhance sleep quality. So that is calming, and you might feel a calming effect from it. But again, none of these things are sedating. You're not gonna, it's not like, oh, let me swap out my Ambien for L-theanine. Like, that's not gonna feel the same.
What
It's
about
a,
those like Alice mushroom, those mushrooms for sleep? It's not, I don't know if they're mushrooms. It's like I think the brand is called Alice, and I don't think it's a drug. I think it's more for like calming sleep meditation.
yeah, I
Have a
mean,
look about that.
all jury's out on all this stuff, and none of it's regulated. So I would just be careful and talk to your doctor, because anything can interact with anything else you're taking. And so you really need to be above board with your physician about whatever supplements you're taking.
I do know that magnesium, when you take it with vitamin D3, you get more out of each of them. So that is something I do know, because what I do take is magnesium, and it does calm my system, and it works for me, but
Mhm.
it might not work for everybody else. So, but I do recommend a bunch of things, and even lavender on your pillow can help. You can spray lavender on your pillow, and that it has a huge calming effect. Also, taking a hot bath. I think we should launch into the things that some strategies that kind of
Yeah.
work. And he talks about a lot of different things, but one of the things I think that's really interesting is body temperature, and how the temperature of your room, because what people don't realize is the colder the better. It's really good to sleep in a cold room. 65 to 67 degrees. I know my mother is on this call and she's dying because she's like doesn't like that. But um it is really, really good for your body temperature, and to sleep in a cool environment. and also a very dark environment.
Yeah, the light is, your body responds to light even with your eyes closed, so that's really important.
Yeah.
But temperature is huge, and the taking a hot bath, but like about an hour and a half before bed is really helpful because it lowers your core body temperature at the time when you want to be going to bed, and that helps you. Plus, there's like hydrotherapy. It just feels good and it helps calm your mind. Um,
They
but
also have, what do you think about the Dr. Teal's melatonin, you know, liquid that you can put in the bathtub? Do you know about that? It's
mm,
lavender
why do
melatonin.
I wouldn't want melatonin anyway, though. Like I just
Yeah,
take a CBD bath, sure. That'll
yeah,
feel great for your joints and your muscles.
right.
But I just think melatonin is overdone.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I don't want to mess with my natural melatonin, basically. Like I don't want to mess with it by making it worse and staring at my phone all night. And I don't want to mess with it by, trying to enhance it artificially. Like I think, the way to take care of your melatonin is to be very mindful of your blue light at night. Make sure your room is super dark. Use a sleep mask if you know that if your room isn't dark, or my room is very dark and I still use a sleep mask because I find that this sort of sensory experience of it is really helpful for my sleep quality.
Mhm. I
Um,
agree. It works for me too.
but in terms of temperature, there's so much tech right now that is designed to solve this problem. Like there's the 8 sleep bed and the chili pad that, monitor your body temperature and keep you at the right temperature all night. My personal preference, and I hope something comes back to mimic it, there used to be a version of that was just for your pillow, which I find much better because it's not freezing your whole body. It's just keeping your head cool, which regulates your whole body temperature. But even sleepwear that breathes and keeps moisture away from you, so that you're not fluctuating like you get hot, you sweat, and then you're cold. If you have sleepwear that pulls that moisture away from you, then you stay more constant. And there's something called a bed jet that circulates air under your sheets that keeps you. And there's actually studies that is really it's really helpful for
There's also
women.
the beds with the different temperatures on each side. So the husband
Yeah.
has a different temperature, and I've read a
Yeah.
lot about that. Um, okay, so let's see. We talked about avoiding caffeine and nicotine, avoiding alcohol, avoiding large meals and beverages late at night. That's another thing. When do you quit eating? I mean, I tell my clients that don't eat after 8.
Well, interestingly, some people need to have something before they go to bed or they wake up in the night with low blood
Yeah,
sugar. So, if you're waking up at 4 in the morning,
and you're hungry.
at, you know,
Yeah.
you might want to try a snack before bed that's obviously not like super sugary, something that's going to hold you. Um, that
Like
can be really helpful.
pistachios that have melatonin or
Hmm.
something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and I that can be really helpful. Intermittent fasting works for some people, but if someone comes to me intermittent fasting and their sleep is fragmented,
Mhm.
um, I will try to get them to at least experiment with not doing that. Um, there's one thing at the top of his suggestion list that I want to go back to though, because
Sure.
it's really super important. He says go to bed and get up at the same time every day. And that I want to qualify and say, focus on the wake up time. Waking up at the same time every day is really the key because it tells your body when to get sleepy at night. Um, and if you consistently wake up at the same time every day or, within a pretty tight window, you will consistently be ready for bed at the same time every night. However, if you are focused on the fact that it's 10 p.m. and you're supposed to be in bed and you're not tired, if you go to bed then, you're more likely to have insomnia because you're not quite ready and then you're pressuring yourself to be ready and you're supposed to be ready and you're anxious about not being ready and then you're tossing and turning and then you're kind of off to the races. Whereas if it's 10 and that's when you usually go to bed and you're not ready and you just say, okay, I'm going to read a little longer and just let my body tell me when it's ready, you'll get there. And you just have to trust that your body's going to tell you versus trying to force it to meet some number of hours that, somebody on high told you you needed.
Right. And the other thing is really that direct sunlight in the morning, that
Mm.
sunlight exposure, so which we really haven't talked about, but I think that's a key for your circadian rhythm to really set yourself up for good sleep at night. So if you can step outside and have a cup of coffee in the morning, that's really a terrific thing. Or even go for a walk really early is nice.
Yeah.
So, anything else we didn't, I'm going to open it up to everybody else.
Yeah.
Ask them just specifically what their what their sleep schedule's like and if they have any issues and if we can help. Anybody want to? No?
I've got a question about naps.
Okay.
How do you
So
feel about naps?
if you are not sleeping well at night, um, when I'm treating people and doing sleep restriction, which is designed to kind of help reboot the body clock, we stop napping during that period of time because sometimes napping will deplete the pressure you need to make you sleep well at night. However, short naps are usually fine, especially if they're before 3 o'clock. I actually say 4 because I like actually starting my power nap at 3. So, but if you keep it to, 20 to 30 minutes, then you're only getting into light sleep. It's the real problem comes when you get into deep sleep which comes after that first 20 to 30 minutes. If you get into deep sleep, it takes time off of your sleep needs for the night, sort of steals sleep from the next night, and it also makes it much harder to wake up. And so you're much more likely to oversleep. Because you get what's called sleep inertia. You wake up and you're like, it's hard to come out of that sleep. So power naps, there's like lots of data on power naps being great for your health and learning and memory. And it's certainly better than having another cup of coffee in mid-afternoon. But if you're a person who can't wake up from naps and then don't take them, that usually means you're not getting enough sleep at night, honestly. So, if it's hard for you to wake up from a nap.
Any other questions?
How long is the power nap supposed to be? Is it 20 minutes?
20 to 30, yeah. It differs by person, but basically, if you set an alarm, it really helps because then you're able to kind of relax, knowing you're going to be able to wake up when you're supposed to, and it helps you get to sleep a little faster. And then usually that 20, 30 minute is good.
We talked about food before bed. If you are hungry, what do you recommend? Or Emily, what did you recommend?
Emily,
Both of
I'll
you.
leave it to you.
Pistachios are really good. Tart cherries,
What?
pistachios,
Oh,
a handful of almonds. Cherries, although they have natural sugar in them, if your sugar affects you, it might not be good to have fructose. And so there's a couple of things. Some people say dark chocolate, really dark chocolate, but I wouldn't do that. But I
doesn't
think
that wake you
handful
up?
of nuts is really great, and it's filling. So
Yeah.
Great.
The
that's the big
protein
thing.
fat combo is what
Yeah,
I
it's really good.
That's
And
great.
protein in general, at dinner is really important, I think, for
Yeah.
sleep. So, the other thing we really didn't talk about that we only have like 4 more minutes, but I will say this is one of the things that people don't realize is that you can't make up your sleep. So if you sleep 6 hours and then the next night you think, oh, I'll just make it up, I'll get those, or 5 hours and I'll get those 3 hours the next night. You really can't make it up because that's, when you're sleeping, you're consolidating memory, you're getting rid of the toxins. So that's why I think sleep schedule is so important. Just sticking to a schedule that works for you. And it may take a while to figure out what that schedule is because everybody's biologically different. So, any thoughts, Janet? Any last minute thoughts? And
I think
if anybody has another question, please ask before we.
I just have a quick question. What do you do about the 3 a.m. every night wake up, regardless of what you eat or drink?
that's where you pick up a book and you just say, this is what happens. It's okay. I'm not going to be up forever, as you know, and you just keep your mind occupied with something pleasant and it should come back. And what you don't do is alter your wake up time and make it later to accommodate for that or go to bed super early to accommodate for that, because what that will do is actually stretch out that waking. So you want to keep a pretty consolidated sleep window so
Okay.
that your body doesn't become biphasic and have this like, solidified hour awake in the night. And if you train yourself with picking up a good book and staying calm and just be like, okay, this is just what's happening now, it should shorten. It might not go away, but it should shorten, and that's enough. Um,
Okay.
but my final thought, Emily, is that, this book really sort of frames it as though there's this ideal and everything you do takes away from it. And that I find to be very scary and off-putting for people. And no shade on him. I think he's brilliant and this research is incredible and he's put it together in this amazing way. But when it comes to motivating people to make change, I think it's really important to think about things in an additive way. So what can I do to improve this? What can I do to sleep better and feel better? Not, like what can I do to not shave years off my life because I didn't sleep this 3 hours? You can't be perfect. You are going to miss sleep. It happens. Whether it's by choice or because you're, sick or things happen and you just are in an acute phase of insomnia or you're in menopause or whatever. If that is accompanied by fear of terrible outcomes because of this one incident of poor sleep, it turns it into a much bigger prolonged problem. And so the body is imperfect and there are all kinds of risks and assaults on it all the time, and we have to kind of make peace with that and do our best, and that doesn't mean being perfect all the time. It just means taking good care.
With that said, I want to thank you very much. And
Mhm.
does anyone else have a question real quick before we go?
No, I just want to say thank you very much. That was really interesting.
My
Thanks.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
And I will email everyone Janet's contact information in case you want to contact her. And I'll send you my information. I think you all have that. But I really appreciate you being here, Janet. And I'm
I appreciate
excited to
you
meet
having
you
me.
in New York. I'm meeting her soon in New York.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Janet. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye, y'all.
Have a great
Bye.
night.
Thank you.